Hola amigos, ¿qué tal? Stuart here from Spain Speaks with an update on the current situation here in Spain, day 404 of the current situation, and Spain's handling or mishandling of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020 is back in the headlines today, and the news is not good, but more about that in just a moment. Firstly, a big thanks to all of the people that left comments on the last video. Lots of comments, lots of debate happening there as usual. Thanks to people that supported the channel by buying merchandise, and a big thanks to my patrons on Patreon for your continuing support. Now let's get into the news, and as I mentioned, Spain's handling of the pandemic crisis and the economic crisis in 2020 is back in the headlines today. As we can see here, Spain, the worst economic and health management of coronavirus in the EU in 2020, the largest fall in GDP and among the 5 with the highest mortality last year. Spain's handling of the health and economic crisis caused by the coronavirus pandemic in 2020 has had the worst results in the European Union. Spain is the country with the largest fall in GDP last year and is among the 5 with the highest COVID-19 mortality relative to its population size. In Spain, gross annual product GDP fell by 10.8% in 2020. This is the biggest fall in the European Union according to Eurostat data. It is even the largest of all the European countries included in the statistics of the Community Office. The second worst is the United Kingdom, already outside the EU, with a fall of minus 9.9%. In Germany, it fell by minus 4.9%. So there we go, that headline there from the newspaper ABC, pointing out once again just how bad the situation was managed in 2020 from a health and economy perspective. Some of, if not the worst data in the European Union, and it'll be interesting to see how the handling of the situation in 2021 compares to 2020. Now, as we all know, we're in the middle of an election campaign here in the Madrid community, although you could think it is a national election given the publicity it is receiving. Last night, the first election debate with all of the candidates took place, and pandemic deaths, the menas, and the food bank queues were the most tense moments of the first debate. The first six-way debate between the main candidates for the elections in the community of Madrid has left some very tense moments, especially when dealing with the management of the pandemic, unaccompanied minors or menas, and food bank queues, with accusations and personal attacks between the left-wing bloc and the president of the region, Isabel Díaz Ayuso, in a true reflection of the relevance of these elections on a national level and the moment of polarization that the region is experiencing in the run-up to the 4th of May. So deaths during the pandemic, food bank queues, and the situation of unaccompanied minors, or menas as they are known here in Spain, the main topics of the debate last night. I watched a little bit of it, and to be honest, I wasn't overly impressed by the politicians on show. It seemed to be a real ideological battle between the right and the left, and as we can see in this headline, the return of ideologies and anti-politics. The only debate of the Madrid campaign has ended with a stony fixation on the positions of each of the 6 candidates. Left and right, it seemed that these concepts were in disuse, and so it was in the last general and regional elections where a transversal message was imposed aimed at receiving support from all quarters. Yes, there were exceptions with Vox, whose objectives were to gamble everything on the emotions that could be produced from invocations of Spanishness and traditions, very much shaped in their particular understanding. With the Madrid elections, ideology has returned. So the return of ideologies and anti-politics, and as I said before, it was on display yesterday for everybody to see. It seems that some politicians here in Spain are hell-bent on bringing back that ideological war, and the question is, what relevance do some of these ideologies have in modern politics? I don't know. Let us know what you think in the comment section below. Now, the topic of vaccination certificates is back in the headlines today, with another autonomous community saying that they will require one if people want to enter that particular autonomous community. The Galician government, the Xunta, asks for the vaccination certificate to allow entry into Galicia despite the perimeter closure. The Xunta will raise at this afternoon's meeting of the Interterritorial Health Council that the vaccination certificate will serve as one of the exceptions to be able to enter Galicia when the community is, as it is currently, in perimeter closure because of COVID-19. This was explained by the Regional Minister of Health, Julio García Comesaña, at the press conference following the meeting of the Clinical Committee, in which he insisted that this certificate, which the Xunta has been providing since last Thursday, should begin to facilitate mobility. But the central government's Health Minister Carolina Darias gave her opinion on Galicia's proposal yesterday, saying that there cannot be an accumulation of regional certificates. The Minister of Health, Carolina Darias, considered this Wednesday made that the COVID digital certificate to facilitate mobility has to be won at a national level within the scope of the European Union, and there cannot be, under any circumstances, an accumulation of regional certificates. So the central government wanting a common certificate in order to facilitate mobility and not 17 different ones, which as we can see is starting to happen in places like Galicia and Andalusia. Now, on the topic of vaccines, there was another setback yesterday for the AstraZeneca vaccine, as the health department rejected voluntary vaccination with AstraZeneca for the under 60s. The updated immunisation strategy states that it is unethical for people to choose the drug even if there is informed consent. The Ministry of Health has rejected Wednesday that people under the age of 60 can be vaccinated earlier if they voluntarily choose to do so with AstraZeneca's under 60 drug. At least for the time being, this option is ruled out. The sixth update of the strategy for vaccination against COVID-19 in Spain, published on Wednesday morning, rejects it for the first time explicitly in response to the request made by several autonomous communities such as Andalusia, Catalonia and Madrid. So it's unethical, according to the Ministry of Health, that people under the age of 60 voluntarily get vaccinated with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So again, it looks like people are just going to have to sit and wait for their time to be called. And just another example of how the central government here in Spain wants to control every detail of this vaccination rollout. Now, the Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez also spoke about vaccines yesterday when he said that Spain is going to give some 7.5 million vaccines to Latin American countries. As we can see here, Spain is to deliver 7.5 million doses of vaccines to Latin America this year. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has announced that Spain will allocate between 5 and 10% of the total amount of vaccines against the coronavirus that it will receive in 2021 to Latin American countries. There will be at least 7.5 million doses this year, which will begin to be distributed according to the needs of the countries when the threshold of 50% of the Spanish population being vaccinated is reached. This will be done through the COVAX mechanism promoted by the World Health Organization and the Pan American Health Organization. So Spain showing its solidarity there with other Spanish-speaking countries in Latin America. Now let's have a look at some health data around the country. We can see that the accumulated incidence rate the last 14 days is now at 229. The total amount of cases in Spain now over the 3.4 million mark. There are currently 10,108 people hospitalized around the country with COVID, and there are 2,288 people in ICUs in Spain, which is just under 23% of all ICUs in Spain. There were 148 COVID-related deaths recorded yesterday, which was down 33% on previous data. And when it comes to the vaccination plan, we can see that 7.6% of the population has been completely vaccinated, and 20.8% of the population have received at least one dose. Now, there's been a lot of talk in the press here recently about that new European Superliga, and as we saw yesterday, it doesn't look as though it's going to get off the ground. One of the key people behind this new Superliga is Real Madrid president Florentino Pérez, and as we can see from this headline, for Mr. Pérez, it is the failure of a personal dream. The instigator of the Superliga singled out as the biggest loser of a project whose financing was provided by a bank on which his company ACS is dependent. A couple of blows were enough to bring down the whole house of cards set up by Florentino Pérez. He, as well as Andrea Agnelli, the president of Juventus Football Club, had been preparing for more than a decade a big deal aimed at changing the current concept of football and transferring it completely to a pure business. The idea was simple: limit the game to the powerful with some handouts for the poor, signing in blood a financial engineering that would move billions and billions of euros outside the channels of economic control of those in charge: leagues, federations and confederations. So, for Florentino Pérez, the failure of a personal dream, but according to Mr. Pérez, at least what I have read in papers today, he's still optimistic that the project can get off the ground. So it seems he's not willing to give up just yet. Now let's have a look at some of the comments from recent videos. One here from Robert: "Hi, I have followed you from the beginning, being over here in Spain since the start of the pandemic. Just a little snippet on the vaccine in the UK. My friend went for his second yesterday, only to be told to come back next week as there was none left. Keep up the good work, mate. Rob." Yeah, Rob, thanks for the comment, and good to see that you have been following the video since the start of the pandemic. And the problem that your friend had in the UK yesterday, that he wasn't able to get his second dose because they had run out of doses, seems to be a problem in a lot of countries, especially here in the European Union and Spain. We saw the other day that various autonomous communities were talking about suspending their mass vaccination centres because they just didn't have enough doses to vaccinate all of the people that had appointments. But we have been told on numerous occasions that more vaccines are going to arrive, that the plan is still to have 70% of the population vaccinated here in Spain by the end of summer. So we have to put our faith in politicians, unfortunately, because basically we have no other choice. I saw here on the news here the other day that the situation in some parts of the United States is completely different, and they apparently have an oversupply of vaccines there. So a tale of two worlds at the moment, the United States and Europe. One here from M. Belton: why people describe the Mediterranean diet as low in red meat is beyond me. Not anywhere I've been in the Mediterranean. Yeah, M, thanks for the comment. I suppose there is a difference between the traditional Mediterranean diet and the Mediterranean diet that we have today. Maybe it is a fact that there is too much red meat in the diet today. I don't know. There are some parts of Spain where red meat does seem to be a very important part of the diet, especially if you go to the north of the country, to places like the Basque Country. They're famous there for huge pieces of meat called chuletones. So it could be that more red meat has crept into the diet over the years. But Spain is still one of the biggest fish-eating countries in the world, so I imagine there are some parts of the country that still eat more fish than red meat, but I'm not really an expert on the Mediterranean diet. One here from Chris: with regards to bullfighting, I think you are right. Stuart, it doesn't seem very controversial at all. Here in the Canary Islands, no one talks about it. I suppose the fact that there are no bullfighting events at all here probably helps. Before I lived here, I lived in the deep south of Andalusia, and along with flamenco, it's more integrated into the lifestyle than religion. Yeah, Chris, thanks for the comment. We spoke about bullfighting the other day because one of the big bullfighting festivals here in Madrid is coming up, the San Isidro bullfighting event, and central government politicians were talking about possibly banning that event because of the health situation in the Madrid community. And somebody also posed the question the other day on whether or not bullfighting is still popular in Spain. I was under the impression that it is still popular in some parts of the country, at least in this part of Spain, the central part, and of course Andalusia, as you mentioned there, you can also see bullfighting featuring quite prominently at local festivals. But I was having a conversation the other day with somebody who lives in Pamplona, and he told me that young people don't seem to be really interested in bullfighting anymore, so perhaps it doesn't have much of a future in the country. Time will tell. One here from David: another great video, thank you for the update. With the employment situation in Spain, it is surprising that they have to bring in shearers from South America. Yeah, David, thanks for the comment. Obviously related to that story we saw the other day about Uruguayan shearers and how they have been infected with COVID-19, and people don't know whether they brought the virus into the country or whether they caught it here. I think some people in Extremadura, where the shearers are located, are blaming them for a recent outbreak. Something like 40 people apparently have been infected because of these shearers. And you're right, it is surprising that Spain needs to bring in people to shear sheep, especially with such high unemployment. But it's most likely because people here are not interested in that type of work anymore. And I also imagine that for a lot of young people, it's not a very attractive job. Hence the need to bring in shearers from South America. One here from Charles: loving your videos. Have you heard anything about change of speed limits changing from 50 to 30 kilometers per hour in towns and villages? Yeah, Charles, thanks for the comment. I do know a little bit about this. I have seen in the local streets here that there are now new street signs up. 30 kilometers per hour is the maximum speed that people can travel when it is a two-lane road with traffic coming in the opposite direction. I saw the person in charge of the traffic department on the television here the other day, and he said that the reason for the change was to reduce the amount of pedestrian fatalities. He said that if you get hit by a car doing 50 km an hour, you will most likely die as a result of the injuries, but if you get hit by a car doing 30, you have a better chance of living. So that is the reason for the speed change. And finally, one here from Nigel: in the comments you reviewed, it was mentioned about digital nomads and Spain reforming its system to be entrepreneurial friendly. Ha! Impossible. Statist socialists hold all the power in Spain because this is what people vote for every time. There exists a mentality that people who get rich are evil. That's why most of Europe remains in the doldrums economically, but never change. Yeah, Nigel, thanks for the comment. The topic of digital nomads did come up the other day. People go into places like the Canary Islands in order to work, spend their time in the sun, connect their computer, and away they go. Somebody pointed out in the comment section that Spain is not very friendly when it comes to entrepreneurs, and that if they wanted more digital nomads to come, they would have to change the rules. I've been living here for over 20 years, and I haven't really seen any desire from governments to change the situation when it comes to making the country more business friendly, and people do vote for the same politicians and policies over and over again. Look at Andalusia, they had the same government in power down there for something like 35 years. Extremadura, the similar situation. Things have changed now in Andalusia, but I don't know if the PP government are making many changes or not, but it does seem that Spain is a country where they want to make it difficult for people to do business, and I hope it changes. On that note, I'll start to wrap the video up. Questions and comments, please leave them in the section below. Debate the situation out as you normally do. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you didn't. I'll see you in the next one. Hasta luego.